As above, so below, as within, as without. Welcome to Wheel of Ezekiel Astrology Podcast, Episode 9, The Decans of the Zodiac. I am joined once again by astrologer and author Michael Suter to discuss this very fascinating way of studying the zodiac via the decans, which is a subdivision of each of the signs. Essentially, there's a way of dividing each sign into three 10-degree segments, each of these having a sub-planetary ruler. It's a very deep subject that does not seem to get much attention nowadays in Western astrology, as it's a more recent discovery from the Hellenistic tradition. So, Michael, welcome back. Good to have you here.
Thanks so much, Ezekiel. It's great to be back. Yeah, it's a great topic, and I'm so glad we're able to talk about this today.
Yeah, I've really been wanting to get into this for a really, really long time. And you just were the only person that really came to mind to really get down to the nitty-gritty details of it. So, how about to start off? You give a little bit of a background of this, what the history of the decans is, and what's a good framework to begin to kind of tackle this subject to understand it.
Sure. So as you mentioned, the decans are 10-degree sections of each sign, and they have they're probably the oldest form of astrology that we know of. They found the decans carved into sarcophagi from Egypt, going back to I'm not sure which dynasty, but excuse me, quite a long time. So clearly these were very important going back to Egyptian times.
Is that the Denzera zodiac you're referring to also as well? You say sarcophagi, but the Denzera zodiac had these 36 divisions as well, is my understanding, or is that not quite accurate?
Yeah. Yep, I believe that's correct.
Okay.
The decans go. Yeah.
Okay.
So the decans are for astrologers who know the most basic forms of dignity, which are the sign rulership and exaltation. Decans are a really different form of dignity because they don't have the same type of rulership connotation that a ruler or an exalted planet have. So if you look at, I think it's the work of Bonatti, who's a very famous Italian astrologer.
Could you repeat that?
He described. Sure, that was Bonatti. Yeah, a very famous astrologer who was, I believe he was in he was put in one of the levels of hell by in the Faust stories. So he was a very notorious astrologer. So he described the rulership of a sign as being the king. You know, this is the ultimate ruler. Then the exaltation ruler is a visiting magistrate who can interpret the law of the land. So that's a pretty good place to be at. It's one of the highest, exaltation is one of the highest things you can have. And then below that you have the terms or bounds, which is sort of like having family in that sign. You're not necessarily resident, but you have so you're connected. You got connections there. And then there's triplicity, which is another form of dignity, which is like being a citizen who can vote, who can have some basic say in how things work. Even in a monarchy, we're talking about a monarchy. Being a citizen, you're in good standing, and you're pretty much guaranteed that the law is going to treat you with some respect. Now, the decans are a radically different sort of dignity because they are more like something that's innately in the character of the planet that's there. It's not from connections. It's not from an external sort of dignity that you get from society or from being connected into the people there. This is something that's internal about your character. It's something that's like a strength or a superpower that you have, but it's limited to that decan. that 10 degrees. So it's like like the ruler has this power that's it's seasonal. You know, it's the rulers are it's a very important part of the season. They're somehow shepherding the life force through the of year. Their power is overarching in that section of the zodiac, whereas the decan is something very specific. So it gives you it gives that planet something. It could be extraordinary
Sorry,
power.
could you repeat that? It froze for a second.
Okay, it could be like an extraordinary power, but it's just limited to those 10 degrees.
Right.
So as we go through decans, I'm going to start describing the. Well, first I'll start by describing the two forms of decanic rule. We can get into that first. So the first way that decanic rule is determined is the descending Chaldean order.
Right.
So the descending Chaldean order is simply the planets going from the slowest to the fastest.
Right.
So
Which just to list those real quick. So it'd be Saturn, then Jupiter, then Mars, then the Sun, then Venus, then Mercury, and then the Moon.
That's correct. And once you've gotten through those 7 planets, you go back to the end and start going back down again.
Right. It just meets full circle, right? Very good.
Full circle. Exactly. So the second form of decanic rulership or dignity that is parallel to different things, which sort of triangulates each one of these decans. The second form of decanic rulership is derived from the what's called triplicity, which means it's the next sign in that element is going to give us the rulership of the next decan. So, for example, if we're in Taurus, we have the first decan being ruled by Venus, and the second decan will be ruled by Mercury, because Virgo is the next Earth sign as you go around the zodiac. So you start with technically you'd start with the cardinal, but the example I gave you starts with the fixed. So the next after that is going to be the mutable. So mutable Earth is Virgo. So the next after that is your cardinal Earth, which is Capricorn, which gives you the ruler Saturn. So if we wanted to go through the let's start with Aries, just because that's where everything begins.
Yes.
You have any questions about that, or you want to just dig right into it?
Yeah, I could get into it. I mean, one thing to note is that Mars has a very particular, special. It rules 2 decans back to back. The last decan of Pisces, and then it starts the zodiac again in the first decan of Aries. So there's kind of this unique spot in the whole circle where Mars kind of gets this privilege of ruling 2 decans in 2 different signs back to back. So that kind of also seems to indicate kind of that's a good starting point in a way, because it starts with Mars and ends with Mars. Kind of like Ouroboros swallowing his tail in a way. But yeah, let's just start with the first 3, just the first 2 decans in Aries. And
then, absolutely.
Move through.
So the first decan of Aries is going to be ruled by Mars by the Chaldean order, and then also by Mars by triplicity. So we're going to see this happen fairly often with the decans, where you have the repetition of a ruler. So you have it double ruled by a single planet. Those should really stick out to us when we see that happening, because that means there's something very particular about that planet and that decan and what it means.
And that season too, right? That part of the year, particularly being very Martian.
Yeah, there's something very particular about this. So one thing that's important to remember too is that each of the decans, so as I go through them, you got to remember that this doesn't displace the sign ruler him or herself. They still rule that whole section, and these are like subcategories with a particular story. So decans are more like a poetic type of astrology that give you a more of a narrative than the other forms of dignity. So the first decan of Aries, as I said, is ruled by Mars, and also by Mars in a Mars-ruled sign. So the symbol that's often seen for this pretty much universally in the Decanic artwork is the axe. There's usually a guy with an axe, and this is a the axe is a tool that can be used to cut your way through the brush, to cut the wood, but it can also be used to cut your enemies in half, and also be used to slaughter the pig or whatever animal it is that you have for food. So it's a it's a tool that's not only is used in a martial fashion, but it's also a tool that's used to as a sort of a pioneering sort of symbol. It brings us through the wilderness, and this decan is very individuating. This is where we find ourselves as individuals, and it's really us against the world. It's us as the finding ourselves, in a place where we have to. We're it. We are the thing that's going to save us. We're the thing that's going to get us through everything. So this can be, there can be a dark side to everything, and this, when you get this decan in its, sort of its shadow form, you're going to find people whose only real way of going through the world is combative. It's always a combat. It's always something that they need to fight. That's the only way they see the world. There's some very famous martial artists and fighters who have Mars in this decan. It's a it's one of those things you'll see some, it's sort of a cartoonish thing. You get these people who are incredible fighters. So that's the first decan, and as I said, there's decans are remarkable because there's artwork and images that tend to go along with these.
Speaking of that, and just the image that I correlate to it, working with the minor arcana, I really like the Thoth so I don't know who can see this. It's this is the Two of Wands. I guess the lighting is not so great right now for this, but yeah. So it's called the Lord of Dominion in the deck that Lester Crowley designed. I just really like it aesthetically, so it's my favorite deck for that reason. So, I mean, you said an axe, but similarly also just two wands kind of crossed, and just even that title being given it to the Lord of Dominion, that you have dominance. It's obviously very Martian. Having to use your own will force to kind of plow through that pioneering of having to kind of carve your own trail, your own path to push forward, because no one's going to do it for you. So that pioneering spirit. So yeah, again, I don't know how well that's going to show up on there, but anyway, that was just my image correlation to that. But
yeah, and that's you make a great point, which I didn't mention, which is that the minor arcana are going to correspond to each of these decans. And the artwork in the minor arcana is more or less appropriate sometimes. You find it's always worth looking at. It's always something that gives you some insight. And when I do readings, introduce people to the minor arcana for their at least their ascendant and probably the ruler.
Sorry, Michael, it cut out again. Sorry, the connection seems to be a little bit off today. Yeah, it is as well. So you said for their ascendant, generally you'll use the card correspondent to that decan?
Yeah, for the decan of their ascendants and the ruler of their ascendants and their sun and their moon often.
Right, the big three. Okay.
You find that it's really good to use imagery for astrology too. It can be really helpful to bring people into the frame of mind.
I do it all the time. Yeah, I think there's a reason why they're matched like that so well. But
exactly.
Great. All right.
So let's move into the second decan of Aries. Is remarkably enough, it is also a double ruled decan. It is a sun decan by the descending Chaldean order, and it's also according to triplicity, the next sign, fire sign, is Leo. So this is a remarkably solar decan, and it's also remarkable because within this decan is the 19th degree of Aries, which is the highest degree of exaltation of the sun, which is a remarkable and I believe that's the only time that happens in the entire zodiac, where you have the ruler, a double ruler of a decan, and it's also where their highest degree of exaltation happens to be.
That's powerful. Just to clarify, just for for people in terms of degrees. The degrees, because it's 10 degrees per segment, right? That you're dividing three segments for the 30 degrees. It starts at actually at 0 degrees. That would be the first degree because you don't count one. So so 0 through 9 is the first decan. Then 10 through 19 would be the second decan. And then 20 to 29 degrees of the sun would be the third decan, essentially. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. Just keep so you'll see it's pretty much right at the end of the second decan, this exaltation of the sun, if you want to place it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And the imagery of this is a little bit more variable than the first one, which is pretty much universally a guy with an axe, like some huge guy with an axe and fiery eyes usually. The second decan is often a crown. This is the decan of leadership. This is the highest decan of leadership. This is your sun king, where you've got a this incredibly individuated, powerfully masculine character under the rule of Mars. And Mars is the, as we've mentioned, the individuating. He is in the night sect, but he is the malefic, which means that he actually brings us out of the feminine, out of the darkness, out of the unconscious realm. Mars is patrols the unconscious and brings things to our attention that we need to deal with for our own safety and security, and for our own self-protection. So this is this is a very individuated sun. It's a very much a sun that rules by example, more so than your Leo sun, which is a bit more performative, perhaps. This is everybody loves the sun in Aries because it's just starting to get strong. It's just starting to show our what the springtime is like. It hasn't become too hot yet. In Leo, it's things can be quite balmy and unpleasant. But here we have a sun who's fresh and has just is the harbinger of the spring.
Right.
So this is it's a very powerful decan, and you'll find planets in this decan will tend to have this sort of leader type quality, no matter which planet it is. Obviously, if your sun's there, that's pretty extraordinary. But even if you have a Saturn there, you may have like an inverted situation where it's not in its decan, but it's in this incredibly powerful place of rulership. So you get like the black sun, the dark king, the antichrist type of character. That's really sort of the inversion, or the this something that stands out by its incredible darkness.
Okay, right, because Saturn is in fall to begin with, and but being in this decan, does that make it then even more afflicted, so to speak, or is it not? Is it really? It's not really an empowering position for Saturn to be. How would you interpret the dignity of that?
So when you see a planet like that, it's going to have a really hard time expressing itself in its true archetypal fashion. It's going to express itself in a way that is, in a very different fashion. That's not, there's a reason that Saturn rules the, Capricorn and Aquarius. And it's because it's a cold time of year and we have to stay inside, and we need to be very careful of what we do. Whereas in this time of year in Aries, we've got spring fever.
It's an extroverted time of year. Yeah, it's the antithesis. The environment is very antithetical to what Saturn is about. So yes,
exactly.
It's not its element whatsoever. So it's not a happy Saturn. So
exactly.
I would see that then as maybe more of the less pleasant, less productive, less positive, because there are positive attributions to Saturn coming out. And in this case, would be kind of the opposite, because it's also obviously opposing Libra, which is its exaltation. So it's kind of in its lowest possible realm. It's still a bit hot, a bit too hot for.
A bit too hot, and a bit too much testosterone, shall we say?
Yeah, exactly.
Masculine, because Saturn is emasculating. That's his basic.
And this is the most fertile time of year, so it's it's an environment. It's it's not at all.
Anyway, Saturn is especially irrelevant this time of year.
Right. The image corresponding with this.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's called the Lord of Virtue. This would be the 3. I don't know how well you can see that. There's always this glare. Unfortunately, it's kind of obnoxious. So I don't know what to can't really fix it right now. But anyway, so if anybody just wants to look up this deck to look at it a little bit more closely if they're not familiar with it. So Three of Wands. Virtue seems to really kind of connote that, what you were just saying as well, being that it's the sun's highest exaltation point. Right. So it's essentially all of the most benefic qualities of the sun coming through in its best expression, its highest expression. If you really meditate on what virtue really is, I guess, like, to me at least, that word really, it's a very solar word in the most positive sense. But anyway, we don't have to hover over that more. Do you want to move to this? Well, go ahead. Yeah, if you have another comment on that.
The term exaltation. Go ahead. The term exaltation, it's important to know that that's a biblical term. That means when Christ is exalted, he's said to have returned from the underworld. He's come back from the dead. He is exalted. So it's sort of an Orphic kind of idea. So the sun in Aries has come back from the underworld, which is exactly what has happened. Pisces is the last sign of the celestial sea, where the days are shorter, and this is his emergence into the extroverted upper world. So it's
so the high place.
It's
coming from the low. Like it's starting its journey on the solstice, December 21st, and beginning to work its way from the lowest point, which would be kind of like the sepulcher of the zodiac in Capricorn, kind of like the boneyard, you could say, and then beginning its ascent. And to then, at this point, the way I visualize it, it's arrived at the highest place. It's like its highest throne. It's like its place of utter glory, utmost glory, essentially. That's the image I see of the solar king, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Very good.
And you also find that Easter will often fall sometime around that too, which
no
is
surprise.
Which is Easter falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon in Aries. So it's not uncommon to see
all Christianity essentially is just a rescripting of the pagan holidays. So really, they just kind of superimposed their new mythology of their solar Christos over the top of it, whether Christians are aware of that or not. That's really what that is, and that's why it falls there, and that's why it aligns so much. But it's ultimately a pagan. It's ultimately zodiacal, astrological in its symbolism. So, but not to get too much into astrology right now. But
that's another podcast. We could do that sometime.
For sure. Yeah, it's another fascinating thing. Okay, let's move to the third decan of Aries then.
Yeah, so the third decan of Aries is one that's dear to my heart personally, because I have three planets.
Three planets there?
It is ruled by. I have 3 planets there.
Oh wow! Okay.
It is ruled by, according to the descending Chaldean order, Venus, and according to triplicity, it has got a little bit of Sagittarius to it, so it's Jupiter. So the third decan of Aries is this very unique kind of place, where you have the two benefic planets are weighing in on this very fiery and fierce territory. So this is it's a really interesting place because it brings this sort of artistic and sexy sort of thing to the to Aries.
I can resonate with that. I have my moon actually in the third decan of Aries, so what you're saying, I get that. Being that Jupiter Venus, right? That's
right. So you have a much more benefic, and beauty seeking kind of thing, but it's also still Aries. So it's a place of it's conflicted, and the reason it's conflicted is because the this is where
you cut out, Michael. Sorry, if you can repeat that.
From the darkness. Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, we're having a little bit of problems here. I cut out for a good minute there, so I didn't catch the last couple of things you said there. So let's see. It's just unfortunately the connection is not holding up so good. Okay, let's just just recap that again. So
so the Aries is a conflicted place, and it's conflicted because this is it's a huge assertion of masculinity into what has been a very feminine winter. It's all of a sudden the masculine is what is valued, that which is extroverted, that's which is emerging from the darkness suddenly becomes relevant, and it's what everybody has been waiting for months now. So it's a certain amount of conflict, and everything has to be sort of interpreted in terms of the goddess. So, and of course, Venus is in detriment in Aries, so that you see that in the zodiac as well. So the third decan is there's a lot of different images that are used for this. If you go to Austin Coppock is the I studied with Austin for about 3 years. His image for this is the a rose that's on fire.
Oh, really? Fascinating.
Yeah, very interesting, huh?
Yeah, well, especially for myself because of my last name. So
yes,
essentially
exactly.
being that my moon is there, and I don't know the correlation. I don't want to get into my chart right now too much, but you just said that it kind of invokes a lot of layers to interpreting my moon because I'm always acquiring new insights into how to interpret that. But that's fascinating. Right.
So it's there's a lot of people who have who have that that decan. It's sort of known for the sort of the extremely sultry person who has lots of knows how to start a relationship, always attracting new people, but has a very hard time keeping that going. They're kind of used to that, the hunt, used to the bringing people in, but not sure what to do with them once they
right.
get
Once you catch it, what do you do with it? Essentially, it's
yeah,
like you like the chase more than the actual, I guess, victory of acquiring the
right.
thing that you're seeking. Okay, yeah, interesting. You said it's kind of
Yeah,
Sagittarius
exactly.
in a way, so that kind of that corresponds to the kind of the hunter, the archer kind of symbolism a little bit, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. The there's a certain speediness to Sagittarius. There's like things move pretty quickly in the Sagittarian world. There's an expansiveness to it also because of Jupiter's involvement. There's also this love of beautiful things. So you get people who are who compose, who like but you also get people who are extremely passionate about like making a statement through their art in this decan. So you get the like a stand-up comedian or somebody who's like extremely political but really funny, or this sort of thing. It's they can bring light and humor to something that's very conflicted. That's
Yeah, like
very
over morality or politics. Like I know George Carlin comes to mind. I don't know that he had that placement, but you just said a comedian, and he's the first one that came to mind in regards to that. Maybe that's kind of the Jupiterian, because Jupiter having to do kind of with philosophy and morality, maybe having kind of those elements that they bring into
Yep.
the,
And like
their
one
work.
person who has this a Venus in this decan is Jack Nicholson. Someone who's very, very charming, but also, you can think of him in The Shining, like sticking his head through the door. That kind of,
Right. Yeah.
kind of deeply disturbing, but also extremely charismatic. And tends to, he plays a lot of really martial roles, but he does it really beautifully.
Yeah. Right. No, that's a great example right there. I can kind of see that. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, so that's Aries. That last decan particularly, I find as a somebody, my sun is there, and my
very
Saturn,
personal, right?
And my Mercury. So I have a
Saturn and Mercury.
great deal of I have a great deal of sympathy for that decan particularly. I know a lot of people who have moon there. I have a lot of friends who have the moon there. So.
Really? Yeah, 28 degrees, so like almost right at the Anoretic.
Right, the Anoretic degree.
Oh,
yeah.
Anyway,
Nice.
And it's kind of the title of this card is called Completion, so it's kind of also a very fitting title because it's kind of wrapping it up because it's the kind of the completion of the sign, but then kind of that whole idea, well, kind of tying loose ends in a way. Just and it's also 4, so if 4 kind of at least in the tarot, at least the minor arcana, so kind of the idea of stability a little bit, kind of the idea that you've kind of built a structure that's kind of stable more or less. Not to say that necessarily, not to be
it's the end of any sign is also, like, according to the terms and bounds, like the last degrees of any sign are ruled by malefics, which is kind of interesting too, which is because when you have change is usually difficult. So you
Right. So
need
it's not necessarily stable, but yeah, right. But you may have
you
accomplished something by that point. But
exactly.
it's kind of like passing through that doorway where things are a little bit fuzzy, maybe because you're in that transitional moment. So your vision is a little bit impaired, maybe because you're exiting one sign, one realm, and entering another realm, and it's kind of that
Precisely.
meeting point, right? So
Yeah, that's
that's why
right.
I've seen in interpreting anaretic degrees, particularly, that it tends to be in the native, it expresses this kind of maybe a little bit of confusion. I don't know. Is that something you've
Yes.
seen a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the anaretic degrees. I mean, you'll see it everywhere in astrology. Like the mutable signs are generally considered somewhat malefic just by their nature, just
Hmm.
as in the final decan of any, especially the final decan of
Of mutable
any
signs.
season is going to
Uh huh.
have a
Right.
particularly malefic
Hmm.
bent to it, because you gotta complete things. You gotta get everything done before the next thing happens, and
Hmm.
you're changing, so that often means like some radical change.
Well,
Things are going to change, so change is
yeah.
difficult, basically.
Right. Right.
So
But
let's move on to
Taurus.
Taurus.
Yep.
Okay, so Taurus is a really fascinating set of decans. So the first decan of Taurus is ruled by Mercury, according to the
Chaldean order.
Chaldean order, and then it's Venus by the triplicity.
Okay.
So Mercury and Venus. So you get you've got your sort of hermaphroditic kind of idea just right there.
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
Two together. So this decan is you would think this was a bit more benefic than it really is. This is about um, surveying land is one of the most basic things. Plowing land.
Like servitude, is that almost like indebtedness and slavery, like you're working the lands, so you're kind of in a position that's, or not
Well,
really?
this is actually, it's sort of the opposite. It's like if you own land, this is like that you get
Okay.
you have to like make sure you're accounting for it properly, that you're planting your
Okay.
seeds and you're doing everything at the right time. So this is
Okay.
this decade has a lot to do with the doing things at the right time.
Okay.
And
Right.
there's
Right.
a certain foreboding nature to all of these Taurian decans, because this
Hmm.
is planting season. And if you
Right.
do not plant your stuff and you don't take care of it properly in this season, you're screwed later on.
Oh yeah.
You're in good trouble.
So it's
So
like the idea of concern and being very kind of a stressful time. So kind of
yeah,
essentially really being kind of on a schedule here because you have deadlines that you need
yep,
to get right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
There's sort of this fierceness that you're coming out of an Aries, where everything is just exploding out of the earth, and it's like, it's just like it's sort of celebratory in a way, but then
Hmm.
you got to get down to business. Now, this is an earth sign,
Yep.
so you got to get down to business. This is the most earthy of the earth signs because it is the fixed earth. So
Yes.
this everything means something here, and it's like you're not messing around. So
Hmm.
even though you got Venus there, but she takes on this aspect where she is the goddess of the earth, but you got to take care of her. You got to be doing
Hmm.
the right thing. You got to be making your measurements. You got to be plowing the fields. You got to be putting the right crops in the right places,
Hmm.
and you got to make your plans. It's all about making plans.
Right.
So this decan has a fair number of images. This is also decan, interestingly enough, where the moon is exalted. So this
Really?
is
Okay.
it's got a special lunar signification too.
What degree?
The
What
third,
degree is it? The third
third
degree
degree, third
of
degree of
Taurus.
Taurus is the
Okay.
moon's highest exaltation, which
Interesting.
is of course 33 degrees past the equinox. Make that you
Okay.
know
Yeah. All right. Right. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. All those little things.
not
All right.
surprising.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
So
Okay. Interesting.
you got
Well.
that. Yeah, very interesting. So yeah, this decan has a lot of implications of worry and concern about what's going to go on. And if you look at the some of the images, I think you have the Rider Waite
Yeah.
chance, or
Oh.
yeah?
Not on hand.
Okay, that's
I
the
just had this one.
no problem.
'Cause
You
the
got
Rider
that.
Waite one. Well, we could pull it up. Well, this one particularly, this being the fifth deck, it's kind of a eerie image. It's called the Lord
Yeah,
of Worry. So that's where I said the idea of concern and being stressed out a little bit, like the idea of worrying about material things. Not necessarily being in a state of lack or anything, but that, you know, knowing there's dire consequences if you don't get your, you know, your business done in a proper amount of time. So Mercury's, you know, the intellect is just kind of firing off. Like once you launch the rocket, essentially in Aries, now it's like you have to actually steer it and navigate it through this terrain to you know, to get through.
Yeah.
So, but yes, that was that one.
It's all tied into your survival here. So it's it's extremely extremely important decan, extremely important territory for us to be thinking about. So the and the images, I believe, in like the Rider Waite are pretty dire. They there's like destitute looking people. It's a pretty I wish I had the deck.
I'm gonna look it up. Let me see real fast if I can share the screen. Rider Waite. Let's see. We're talking about the.
Yeah, it takes a minute. I can it's probably like right behind me. Oh, it is.
Just a second here. I could just get the image just to load. All right, cool. Let me see if I can share this now.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Can you see that?
Yep. There you go.
Yep.
It looks like a crippled person and two destitute people sitting outside the church. It looks like with the stained glass.
Yep, in the snow.
Yeah. The snow.
Very harsh symbolism.
It's a fascinating image considering what the you know, what the time of year is. This is you know, this is reminding you that this stuff's serious. That you're not
almost. It's almost like reminding you or giving you an image of like what will happen if you don't actually get on your job and accomplish your mission. It's almost like this is the consequences of not preparing, of Mercury not being on top of its game and getting its shit done, essentially.
Right. So, yeah, this is very Dickensian here. This is like Charles Dickens, you know, the the ghost of Future Christmas, whatever it is, you know. Yep. So yeah, so there you go. That's the first decan of Taurus. It's a very, you know, there's something very worrisome and very very unnerving about all of it. But it's just telling you what's going to happen if you don't plant your seeds at this point and you don't take care of them. So that brings us into the next decan of Aries, and of Taurus. Taurus is one of these decans where you can see a very logical progression between the decans. They tell a story. Like Aries is, you can kind of see in Aries, you've got the your brutish kind of guy who's
there's a more similar theme. We're here
like fighting his way through the world, and then
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and then you've got the Sun, you know, where your fool, your character has like learned from his you know, his kind of brutish experience, like fighting his way through things, and he's become the individuated leader through that experience. But then he becomes sort of this artist as he you know, goes through that. He becomes like who tells his story of how all of this conflict that he's been through, all the wars that he's been through. He sort of like then becomes the bard, you know, the raconteur of all of this, you know, all of this conflicted, all the tragedies of his life. So in Taurus, it's a much more like a bean counting kind of thing. You got the, you know, what happens first is you have got to plant your seeds, and then what happens next is it's another cautionary tale is what happens if you don't put in regular effort, if you don't make the daily, if you don't go out and feed the animals, you don't like do, you know, prune things, everything falls apart. And again, it's that same idea, but this specifically is about your daily routine, getting everything to, you know, putting the time in constantly, because if you don't put the time in constantly, if you start cutting corners, you're gonna potentially lose everything.
Right. Are we talking about the second decan now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Right. Okay.
Second decan. Yep. The second decan is ruled in triplicity terms by Mercury again. this time, because it's Virgo is the next of the earth signs, and it's ruled by the moon.
Right. In Chaldea's order, right.
So this is a Mercury moon kind of thing. This gets a little bit psychological to a certain extent. But it remains pretty focused on the moon as the mother, as the earth there, and
Can you repeat that? It just cut
moon
out.
is the moon as the earth goddess, and the moon is we know she's exalted in the third house, which again is the in the neighborhood. It's in the daily routine, what we do on a regular basis. So she wants to bring this sort of exalted goddess into our life on the daily basis. So you can kind of get the mercurial part, of course, is this bean counting and being involved in the planning. It's more about planning, but it's about the daily routine of doing the act of taking care of your plants and your animals.
Right. What's the image associated with this?
The image, let me see. I'm drawing a blank on that for a minute.
Sure. Well, in the meantime, I'll show the image in the minor arcana corresponds to the 6 of discs or pentacles. In this case, it's called the Lord of Success. You can by that token, by that signification, you see it as probably a very positive decan. Seeing there, the moon, Mercury. It's also very balanced, being the 6 is, it's an even number. So there's this idea of even the symmetry. That's it's a balanced kind of state. You've just replicated 3, right? So essentially, you're kind of that midpoint. So again, it's one of my favorite, actually, artistically. It's a very pretty card.
It is a beautiful card. So let's see if I can find it in the minor arcana here. Sorry, I don't have it.
No, it's all right. Are you looking for the Rider-Waite image?
Yeah. If you have it.
I can just pull it up. Yeah.
Pull it up. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's a better resolution, probably. Let's see. What are we doing? Really? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I found it.
Did you? Okay. Just for some reason I can't ever get it to enlarge. Okay. Strange. Okay.
So this is like you've got some paupers there. You got the rich person who's like got handing out coins to people at his feet. This is you've got, again, the cautionary thing is like you could be that guy handing out the coins, or you could be the people there at his feet that are begging for whatever. If you don't,
it's like that's also like Mercury the merchant, because he's holding the scales, which is a symbol of the merchant that's there. So it's basically, I see that as Mercury in a way, in one of his expressions.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
There you go. Yeah. So it's a very interesting decan too. It's got this lunar quality. It's a bit more, a bit more positive than the first one, but as we get into the third one, we're back into something that's not so pretty again. So the third decan is by the Chaldean descending order, it is Saturn.
Yes.
And by the triplicity scheme, it is also Saturn. So we're in a double Saturn decan.
Right. Now, which would make sense, right?
Yeah. So this is been waiting for this one. This is This is the decan of what do you do when you think that you've done everything that you can possibly do to take care of your crops and to take care of your property? What it's got there's an image of I think it's in the Rider-Waite too, of a couple of people standing around and kind of looking at their crops, being like, all right, I've done everything I possibly can, and we should be good now, right? But that's a question: is everything going to be okay or not? This is actually the decan of what can you do further to try and take care of your crops and your livelihood. And the answer is insurance. The answer is to like find a way to hedge your bets, to get yourself diversified into other things.
Okay.
For ways to insure your crops. It's actually a very it's insurance where you find a like an actuary, somebody who's willing to to hedge again their bets, and you pay them, and they will if you happen to lose everything, they'll pay you, but most likely you're going to be paying for nothing. But until that particular time when you do in fact lose everything, then you will have done that extra thing, because there's always something that could happen. You could have pestilence, you could have a flood, you could have a war.
All Saturn things, right? So what is that? The Saturn connection? Maybe I'm not fully seeing the correlation there of Saturn. Is it essentially it's preparing for? Well, it's kind of like taking a realist approach, like Saturn be realistic, like don't just assume that everything's going to be fine and dandy, like actually take that extra step to ensure that all your hard work won't just go to waste because you were lazy the last leg of the process. And
that's exactly it. Yep, it's envisioning what's the worst thing that can happen. What is the worst thing that can happen, and to try and do something about it.
It's not inherently pessimistic either, but it's just more just kind of like worst case scenario, taking precaution. Because the title of this in the Thoth deck is called the Lord of Failure, and again
Lord of Failure. Yep.
By the looks of it too, it's kind of a darker, eerier looking card as well.
Yep.
So yeah, and double Saturn. So there's not another planet to kind of balance it out. It's just very, very straightforward, very, very heavy, very lead kind. That's kind of like I think of something that's just a lot of dead weight to it, or pretty much there's a lot of very dire consequences if the right measures aren't taken.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. Right. Yeah, the the fixed star Algol is in this decan currently, so that kind of brings that
that's 26 degrees Taurus, correct?
I believe it's actually 24.
Algol, 24? Oh, okay.
Yeah, 24. And then you get the Pleiades at the very end of this decan, which is around 28, 29, up through like 1 degree of Gemini. So imagery you get with this is generally you get, as I said, people around looking things going like, wow, we've done a great job, and the question is, have you really done a great job? Isn't there something else you can do to ensure that you're actually not going to fail?
Okay, what was the image? You may have said it, but it just cut out. So
the image is like people standing around looking at their crops, looking like they've done all their work, and they're themselves like they're on top of their game. Everything's good, but then the question remains: have they in fact done everything that they possibly could to make sure that it's everything's going to work out for them? So,
right.
Yeah. So that's Taurus.
Right.
Again, it's an interesting set of decans because it's not particularly positive. There's a lot of cautionary tales. It's like just reminders that this is the time of year that you've got to get your stuff together. This is it's not time to be lazy. This is not time to mess around. So moving into Gemini.
Yeah, if you want to talk about this might be the final one. I'm just looking at the time. If you're good to stay a little longer, we can just get through this one and then just split it up into multiple parts because it'll take a bit to get through the whole zodiac. If you're down to do these last three.
Yeah.
Okay.
you want to do this one? I'm happy to do Gemini and then be done.
Yeah, well, no, that's what I was saying. Let's do this one, and then I mean, probably at that point we'll be at time. But let's just we'll just do as much as we can right now. But I think we can make these.
Sounds good. So the first decan of Gemini is ruled by Mercury according to triplicity, and Jupiter according to the Chaldean order. So this is it's a really interesting decan. This is symbolized by, according to Austin, he uses the image of the apple.
Okay, just an apple.
Apple, not because it's the season of apples. This is too early for that. This is the fruit of this is like the apple in the Garden of Eden, where it's you've got the two planets that are most associated to knowledge, the ways of knowing. You've got Mercury is a very bean counting, very oriented towards the very practical type of knowing, and Jupiter is oriented towards a more expansive philosophical way of knowing, the religious way of knowing, which is sort of more right brain. So one is very focused downward on
the details,
and
Jupiter's more
the details. And currently we're in Jupiter is in Gemini right now, and it's this is a detriment of Jupiter, where all of his big plans, all of the his religious faith is sort of entertained by the forces that be in Gemini, but they're not going to really get behind a big religious crusade. They're much more, they'll entertain it. They might think it's interesting, but it's not going to gain any traction here. This is a very cerebral place. Jupiter does have triplicity here, which is good for him. It's an air sign. But this is the decan of the person who has so many talents. They've always been told they could do whatever they want because they're so smart. They have so many great ways of knowing that they wind up getting bound up in possibilities. This is the decan of too many possibilities, where you can do all these things really well. You get proficiency at all sorts of things very quickly, very easily. But do you gain mastery?
No.
Do you actually go any deeper?
Right. You can be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. So kind of spreading your talents a little too thin rather than focusing in on one thing. So that's very Gemini.
That is the great danger of this decan, is becoming bound up in too many possibilities and failing to settle on anything, and to just remain in this place of I'm great at all these things, but not really being great at them. Having a passing knowledge, and like everybody thinks you're great, but you actually can't get much past, you can talk about anything, but beyond that,
it's like really a surface knowledge of a lot of different subjects, but not really being able to go into depth in any particular subject. So again, like you're saying, it gives the idea that you're very knowledgeable, and in a sense you kind of are, but in a very superficial way. So that's kind of what I see with Jupiter and Gemini. That's what I think of, that combination of sign and planet.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the first decan. It's again, Jupiter can be powerful here. It can be you can get, if you have Jupiter in this decan, it can affect one is potentially having
say that again.
There can be some really good effects of having Jupiter in this decan. You do tend to have a bit more depth there, but it's if you have poorly placed planets in this decan, it can be very challenging.
I would think having a positive aspect, like a supporting trine from one of the benefics, like maybe Venus, would be helpful, or even the Sun. I mean, these are all the nuances of a chart that you have to look at. Look at the decan and look at the planet, but then look at what aspects are being applied.
Right. Because that's a good point. Is that, like, there are some planets that fit really badly in some decans. If you want to, you could do a really deep dive into the decans. We could start, talk about who does well and who does badly within any of these. We talked a little bit about like Saturn within the second decan of Aries. There's some obvious ones that give you some, but they can be interesting too. You can get some interesting effects of having a planet there that really doesn't belong. So that's the first decan of Gemini. It tends to spread itself too thin. It's very cerebral, knows a lot of things, but it's potential for not being able to get any depth in any of those areas.
Right. Yeah.
So
the minor
arcana.
Okay, I was just gonna say the title of this card is the Lord of Interference. So it's kind of the idea of something getting in the way, like again, maybe being too many signals being like too many people talking at once, so you can't really make out what any one person is saying. It's kind of what I get with this. Kind of like there's a lot of chatter going on in the background. So it's like, I mean,
this is the 8 of Swords, and
right,
I can show you the decan is
famous card.
So she is bound up. She's literally bound up. And it's because there's too many possibilities. Look at all the swords behind her. She can't do anything. She's all bound up by too many possibilities.
Which in a sense really narrows your vision, because when you have too much going on, you can't really focus on any one thing at a time because there's just too many distractions. So,
exactly.
I guess
exactly. Again, this is one close to my heart too. My ascendant is in here. So
okay.
Yeah.
So well, I mean, talking about tarot is a whole other rabbit hole to get into that symbolism, but it's interesting to at least briefly see the correlations. So
yeah, very cool.
Right.
So getting into the second decan of Gemini, it is ruled by Venus, by triplicity, and by Mars. Yep.
Chaldean order. Right.
Yep. So I think I said that wrong. So it's this is the second. So no, that's correct.
Triplicity is Venus, right?
Triplicity is Venus, and the descending Chaldean order is Mars. Yes.
Right. Okay. So cool. You get both the masculine and feminine planet ruling this mutable sign.
Exactly. So some of the images for this decan are of like a two-headed figure. You have one head that is like a fierce male face, and then you get like this incredibly pleasant, seductive female face.
Is it kind of the hermaphrodite? That's kind of the. I mean, I've seen this hermetic drawing. I think it's what you're describing a little bit. That it's two heads on a body that's clearly both masculine and feminine.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Right. The hermaphrodite is the image that's often used for that. I tend to avoid that word because it's too loaded. I don't tend to use that, but that is traditionally what people use for this decan. So this decan is a place you would find people who are able to go past the stereotypical ideas of what they should be doing and to explore other possibilities. This is exploring the being able to go and like practice martial arts and also be painting or doing some things that are more traditionally feminine things, like doing sewing or all these things. It's a balance of masculine attributes and feminine attributes, and being able to go swing to extremes without missing a beat. So the downside of this can be that you have maybe not so much understanding of what's appropriate, that other people at conventions that are established, and you're doing things that kind of blow other people's minds that they're not really ready to accept. And there also can be that that aspect of transgression for the sake of transgression, where you get people who are just like out to shock people, or willing to be the thing that's that's just goes against the grain in order to be that person, which is just kind of childish, just not really a meaningful thing. So the symbolism of this one, as I said, this is like the hermaphrodite. This is a combination of opposites, and it's the exploration of duality really is like the overall art.
Right. I see it as being very yin and yang with what you're describing here.
Meaning of the.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I think
Go ahead,
the
one more
signal.
time.
I said I see it as being very yin and yang at the same time.
Yes.
Kind of like expressing like creative things, but in a very masculine way. So maybe martial arts is a good example of that. Or there's an elegance and grace, kind of Venusian quality, but where you're doing is maybe more of an aggressive, very intense Martian activity too. So
yeah, exactly. Martial arts is a great example of something that might be that might come from people who have placements in this, like a Mars in this decan, or
like beautiful
Venus
movements.
in the decan could show up that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But it is Mars and Venus, which is it's against extremes. They're both of the night sect.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no concept of sect, but Mars is the disruptor of the night sect, so it's got that signification.
Sure.
So just in the name of time, let's go on to the next.
Well, real quick, I wanted to show the card. It's called it's the Nine of Swords. It's called the Lord of Cruelty. So kind of with what you were saying before about saying something for shock value or almost at someone else's expense. Kind of the idea of playing like playing like a bad joke on someone, maybe is when it kind of what comes to mind, like kind of that idea of, or really it's just kind of agony of the mind as well too. Maybe that conflict of the masculine and feminine, because Aries swords is air, so it connotes the intellect and kind of maybe being in an internal conflict. That's kind of like an internal torment, kind of like that Gemini division of duality, where maybe there's this internal conflict which within just the Gemini archetype of I don't know about a lot of things. I mean, really, I mean, nothing specific comes to mind, but just that in general, like wanting to do one thing, but then also at the same time wanting to do the opposite and not being able to make up your mind, maybe so indecision kind of comes to mind a little bit in that. So it's kind of like not so much something that's external that's inflicted upon one, but the way that one's mind tortures oneself, I guess.
Yeah. So this is the last decan of the season. So there is this
urgency to move things along to get to the summer, because we're approaching the solstice at this point.
Yeah, this is a pretty malefic decan, and it's malefic because it's a shared rulership of Saturn by triplicity and the Sun by the descending order of the Chaldean order. So you find this wherever pretty much there's a bunch of decans in the Zodiac that have this combination. We're going to come up on a few in Leo. There's another one, and there's believe it's the end of Sagittarius too. There's another one. So this is the Saturn and the Sun are pretty uncomfortable together. They don't really play well together. So you've got in this decan, you've got a sense of having to make a decision where you're really like pushed to the wall. You've got to do something, and you could be often this is a case of like self-destructive behavior, things that you need to choose something that is life affirming or something that is destructive to oneself. So therefore you've got your Saturn and your Sun together. And again, it's an air sign, so it's going to be cerebral. And as you were saying, you're intuiting into this very well. It's a very much a internal conflict decan. It's describing that the need to make a decision, and people who have strong placements here, like a Sun here, they'll often be somebody who rides something out to the point where they're forced to make a decision to take one thing or another. And if they choose the right way, they can be saved. If they continue whatever behavior it is that's self-destructive, they can wind up in a very, very bad place. So this is that it's the end of spring, beginning of summer. We don't usually think of that as necessarily being malefic, but it's a change. You've got things are changing. Gemini is a place where the as I've said in my book, this is where the the goddess is split. This is where the life force is split. Everything divides, and it's very easy to allow things to keep dividing to the point where you've lost track of where you were in the first place, and you're
Right.
kind of in the weeds. Just like you see that, this time of year, all the pollen, all of the pheromones of the trees, everything is out. There's so much out, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. While you're in a place where you need to be making predictions for the rest of the summer, you need to be like looking at how your plants are doing so that you'll be able to harvest them. Very easy to just become lost in the weeds of all the activity.
Right.
So
It's always a stressful time as you're also approaching the angles, because it's the 4 angles. So that kind of connotes the idea of the square aspect, which again implies decision, making choices, like reaching
right.
certain deadlines. And again, that division separation, like splitting of the goddess, if maybe the way I see it is the goddess at each of the 4 cardinal points, which is the change of the season, this kind of happens in its own unique way. It'll happen again at the autumn equinox, and then maybe even at the solstice, you could say that as well.
Right.
Because it's kind of that changeover always into a new season.
Yeah.
And that's why the anaretic degrees are considered malefic always, because it corresponds to that part of the story of the year. That's why the anaretic is malefic. Right.
Yep. Yeah, the solstice points and the equinox are like the spokes of the wheel of the year. They are, when you look at the wheel, it's what you have is masculine opposing masculine, and in a square relationship to a feminine. So the spokes are actually like they're
air and
they're
fire,
masculine or they're feminine.
Right, because you have Aries opposing Libra, both masculine.
It's a very interesting.
And Cancer with Capricorn
both
on the other.
Yep.
Right, and then Cancer and Capricorn both feminine.
Both
right.
feminine.
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's probably a good time to.
Yeah, I'm just going to real fast show the image associated with this in the minor arcana. It corresponds to the 10 of Swords, which is called the Lord of Ruin. You probably can't read the title there, but it's another kind of harsh card. Well, I think it's kind of almost a better depiction of the symbolism in the Rider-Waite, because it's the man laying on the ground with 10 swords out of his back.
Yes, exactly.
A much more malefic kind of image.
Right.
Which
absolutely.
Again kind of implies what will happen if you don't correct your course, so to speak.
Yeah. Precisely. Yeah. I'm seeing.
So they're more. So in the tarot, in the minor arcana, it's more of warnings. It's not so much saying that this is a definite thing that's set in stone, but it's almost essentially giving you a warning, almost like a vision. Right. Yeah. Right. It's like an omen of what could be.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Interesting. What's the image Austin Coppock gives for this decan?
That's a good question. I don't honestly remember what that is.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
We will eventually continue this if you're down to do probably a few more parts to finish, just turn this into a mini series, I suppose. Maybe we'll do 3 more signs next time and slowly work our way through the zodiac, because these things shouldn't be rushed. In order to do it justice, I like the way we've done this. We've kind of taken our time with each one a little bit to really get into a little more of the nuance and the details and the story behind it, because I'm very interested in the knowledge you have of all this, because I see you very much, you've studied this a lot, and so and you explain it very well. So I appreciate you coming on today, Michael, and giving us the first insights to this very fascinating doctrine of the decans. So with that, I'm going to call this an end. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Wheel of Ezekiel Astrology podcast. Make sure to check out Michael's Substack. He's got a few really fascinating articles. I think he just published one on the new moon that's coming up.
I did the new moon and the full moon, so
right, and the full moon, right? You do both, right? Anyways, and then there's also this very interesting one I read about Neptune and Aries recently. He also published. It's another one worth checking out. And then also, if you all appreciate what's the work that I'm doing here, please do consider supporting in any way that you can. Anyways, thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time, as above, so below, as within, as without.